We have a guest coming on tomorrow. And Chewie, just so you know, when I asked for the guest if she'd like to come on, it's the president of the Victorian University Students Association. She said, "Oh, my mum watches your show and she loves it." And I was like, how to feel really freaking old from the Gen Z group. So apparently,
did you take that opportunity to go, yeah, I know your mum loves it?
no, gross. Don't be
No,
weird.
missed opportunity.
No. So
This is why I don't ask for the interviewers.
The president's name is Markale Parkinson, I think is the surname, and had an interaction with Karen Oliver Plunket today. And Karen Oliver Plunket decided to tell the world that she doesn't seem to grasp the concept of free speech. My retort to that for Karen would be, he don't seem to grasp the concept of journalism. So we'll have a look at something for you, and I'll show you the shell game that Karen plays, all right? Because it's a really good example of that shell game. This is what the story was about. Free speech versus hate speech. Victoria University postpones debate after student backlash. Victoria University has postponed a planned debate on freedom of speech after concerns the event would become a platform for hate speech. Last week, student magazine Salient criticised the lack of diversity. He should speak to that guy from ACT. He knows all about diversity. Of the 5 confirmed panellists, signalling out the inclusion of the Free Speech Union's Jonathan Ayling as a consistent supporter of harmful rhetoric. Salient sub-editor Henry Broadbent said the Free Speech Union's support of anti-trans activists and the anti-co-governance campaign meant his inclusion compromised the safety of marginalised group on the campus. The speech that, quote, that's in brackets, the Free Speech Union are looking to defend is consistently speech that fits under the United Nations definition of hate speech. It's a really interesting way of framing it, actually. It's a good way of framing it. Mm-hmm. And this is the concern that we have with the university. Why is that you feel hate speech is legitimate discourse that shouldn't be suppressed? He said the presence of Corin Dan from Radio New Zealand as moderator and the Office of the Vice-Chancellor's assurances that statements would be fact-checked during the debate did little to persuade him that holding the event would not compromise the safety and well-being of marginalised groups attending the university. Now, if you haven't been with us for very long, you will probably not have heard me say this before. I'm someone who personally always errs towards more speech than left, but I don't think there's an absolute. There's no such thing as absolute free speechism or not. And if you think there is, yell fire in a theatre or threaten the politician's life sort of thing, there are restrictions on free speech. But I'm personally someone who tends to lean towards more speech rather than less. But I also acknowledge I'm not in one of the marginalised groups that often this free speech is targeted at, so I'm not a vulnerable person. So I always come into it with those kind of thoughts that this is not me who's being potentially vulnerable here, even though I personally lean towards free speech. I don't know, do you want to share what your thoughts are around that idea, Chewie? That's kind of where I sit personally. Chewie may be completely different.
I think it's very easy to say that you're a free speech absolutist and then not be able to handle the agenda at all, which is where Elon Musk finds himself at the moment.
Yeah, true.
Because he is trying to defend showing footage of the stabbing in a church in Sydney recently, and the fact that the Christchurch mosque shooting keeps on popping up on his fucking platform. And the Australian and New Zealand governments keep on saying, can you pull this footage? And he goes, no, I believe in free speech. However, if anybody on that platform dares criticize Elon, banned.
Yeah.
And
even there's also now the stabbing in Sydney, the stabbing of that pastor or cleric, whatever it was in Sydney.
So that's
popping up all
the
over.
one that there's footage of it circulating around. But it's not true. And you know how I know it's not true, Pat? They still haven't unbanned my Twitter account that got banned for saying Leo Malloy is small enough to stuff in a sandwich bag and throw off a bridge.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a joke and not a threat. Whereas a friend of mine who's still on that platform reported an actual threat to murder someone and got a reply back that wasn't a breach of terms of service. So, it's funny that these guys that hold themselves up as free speech absolutists, it's always one side of the argument that they're coming down on. I don't think that anyone is a free speech absolutist.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think there's any value in Hitler 2.0 coming up with his new greatest hits and thoughts on Mein Kampf. We've
Yep.
had that discussion. We
Yep.
all got involved. We all decided in the 40s it wasn't a good idea.
Yep. Yep. I agree.
But one of the things you've always got to consider is, are these things able to be reversed and used against us? Free speech is also not unlimited access to every platform.
Yeah, no, that's not it. Yeah.
Yeah, free speech is the ability to say something and not end up in jail, be black bagged by the government. And everybody that talks about free speech seems to equate it as, I should be able to say whatever hateful shit I want with absolutely zero consequences from anyone.
Yeah, because free speech is about the government. I mean, that's what it's based on in America. It's about the government's restrictions. If someone wants to come on this podcast and we go no, and they go why, and we go because we don't like what you're saying, that's not a free speech issue. That's just the decision we've chose to make because this is our platform. We can do what we want. Likewise, the thing about the Victoria University is the students raised a concern. The university made a decision. And of course, now the students are being vilified that they've done something wrong. They haven't done anything wrong. They've made a cogent argument with their position. They've actually used their free speech, and they have explained to the university why they'd like the university to rethink this, and the universities rethink that. And that seems to be a fairly okay thing. Let me play this for you now. I'm not playing you a lot. I know you guys hate to see old Karen when she pops up or he pops up or whatever pronoun Oliver's using these days. I have cut it very short compared to what it was because Michael got on, obviously got berated by Plunket a lot, got shouted over, got talked down a lot. But he starts the conversation with basically saying, what's wrong with the Free Speech Union? He continues the conversation going, give me examples. You can't give me one example. Give me an example. And Michael's like, there's plenty out there. Look it up. No, you've made give me an example. And so we get to the part of the conversation. You can see they've only been talking for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. And Michael gives him an example. And one of the reasons they were uncomfortable with the Free Speech Union, as it said in that article from RNZ, is the kinds of the kinds of opinions that the Free Speech Union has been supporting. And one of the examples is supporting the opinions of Julian Batchelor, helping further that narrative. Mm-hmm. So when we come into this part of the conversation, it's important to know, right, that Plunket is shouting at Mark Hale about evidence why, that Julian Batchelor has said anything wrong. Remember, they're not saying Julian Batchelor is bad. They're saying the Free Speech Union has been supporting views like Julian Batchelor, because I'll show you where Plunket don't journalist very well. So, right where we're at is there's a connection. It's the Free Speech Union supporting the views of people like Julian Batchelor. That's where we come into the conversation.
We're going to
give us one of those instances, please.
Sean, I don't think that it's reasonable for me to.
I think it's entirely reasonable when you make a statement in a live interview, you say there are instances or examples. I ask you for instances, examples, and you say I'm not going to give them to you.
All right, Sean. Look, I think you can Google any sort of news article. There's been news articles about the Free Speech Union's inability to...
Give me and point me to one of those news articles right now.
So basically, Sean Plunket is using this tool that if you can't provide evidence, then you lose the debate. It's as simple as that. So what does Mark Hale do? Provides the evidence.
Sure. There's an RNZ article which is titled Māori Refuse Entry to Stop Co-Governance Meeting.
Okay, let's have a look at that.
This is Sean Plunket's brain right exploding, trying to figure out how to now get around this.
Maori refuse, what was it? Refuse.
And this is a boomer trying to figure out how to Google, by the way. He's trying to Google in real time. It's not a good look.
Maori refuse entry to stop co-governance meeting.
Okay, well, you can read it. You've got in front of you, obviously. What does it say?
I don't, because I'm locked out of my Facebook.
Who's it by for a start?
Yeah, because that matters.
It's by Maya Hart.
Okay, all right, yep.
It says that Batchelor stopped a Marlborough filmmaker from coming in because Bachelor didn't believe that he was a good Māori who would sit there and listen and be respectful all the way through.
Okay, so
There
we
was no
don't.
evidence
Okay, so straight off.
So let's make this clear. I know you've just heard it because Plunket's going to repeat it incorrectly. There was a man that came to one of Julian Bachelor's meetings. This is after a conversation where Plunkett's gone, there's no evidence that they stopped anyone due to race. There's no evidence for the Julian. I've covered them. There's no evidence. So she's just given from an article about a Māori filmmaker who was refused entry for, and this is a quote from Julia, quote, because he wouldn't be a, quote, good Māori who would sit there and listen and be respectful all the way through. That's why the person was turned away, right? Now, they're a filmmaker. They weren't talking about filming.
Off the bat, the headline's misleading. He refused entry to a film, someone, not just anyone off the street who wanted to come to his meeting. He refused entry for someone who wanted to film the meeting.
It doesn't say that he wanted to film. It just says he was trying to attend. He's just known as a filmmaker.
Oh, he is a filmmaker. Okay, so a filmmaker gets told he can't come to a public meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not actually a blanket race ban, is it? It's one individual.
So due to the fact that he's not a good Māori, that was the quote given by Julian Bachelor.
Yeah, so it's only... and he's not speaking at the event, right?
Jesus.
This is the flip.
Julian Bachelor isn't speaking at the event, right?
No, he's not.
And he's not part of the Free Speech Union, right?
There's the flip.
No, but...
So why are you getting down on Jonathan Ayling about something that Julian Bachelor may or may not have said?
There's the spin. There's the spin. Did you see it? So remember, I'll say it again. That went from, we're uncomfortable with the Free Speech Union because they support views like Julian Bachelor. And at the end of it, the defence that Plunket had was, but that's got nothing to do with the Free Speech Union. They're not Julian Bachelor. No, but he's totally flipped it. He's done the shell game, and he's now saying that Julian Bachelor's not speaking. What's that got to do with Jonathan Ayling? When the whole conversation was, well, it's because people like Jonathan Ayling and the Free Speech Union are supporting Julian. But that was my example with what Markel was saying. That's the example of who the Free Speech Union are supporting and why we're uncomfortable with the Free Speech Union. And he flipped it at the end, and that's why I said that... he might be saying that she doesn't understand free speech, but it feels very, very clear to me, Chewy, that he does not understand journalism. Now, I've spoken to Mark Hale on email today. She was going to come on tonight, but we knew I had a really full show, so we might bring her on tomorrow night and give her some space to actually maybe talk about it and see what they've got to say. Sir.
For anyone that is listening that might consider going on the platform, your best advice is not to. Don't give them the content. Don't give them the satisfaction. The second thing I would say is, if you do make the decision to go on the platform, is don't let Oliver drag you off the point.
Yeah.
Because he moved into uncharted territory by demanding. And then you're moving away from the point that you're trying to make, and he won. He is very good at that. It's nonsensical. Yep. It's frustrating.
Yep.
But he ended that on a win for him.
Yep.
Don't give him wins.
Yep. So he basically ended up by starting the conversation by going, give me evidence of some abhorrent views, my words, that the Free Speech Union have, that the abhorrent views that the Free Speech Union support. And she said, Julian Bachelor. And he ended it by saying, Julian Bachelor's got nothing to do with the Free Speech Union and he's not speaking at that event. Dum, shell game. That's how it works. And I don't know if I call it a win, Joey, but he certainly spun it. And with respect, not with respect, some of his listeners or viewers are too dumb to figure out the shell game because it suits their narrative to just continue on. They can't see that the thing he said at the end was the opposite to what he said at the start. And that's why we, unfortunately, have to highlight it for you.
Yeah. Look, and you can see in the news at the moment where this sort of stuff can go.
Yeah.
So when these guys start talking about free speech, look at what's happening at the universities over in the States, right? I saw a comparison the other day of what was happening in, I think, was it Ohio? Columbus, at their university there of basically armed police and riot gear beating up students for saying maybe Israel shouldn't bomb civilians quite so hard. And the comparison that was drawn in the video was only 6 months ago, there were uniformed people marching under Nazi flags, espousing Nazi views, that were allowed to march by the police on the point of view of free speech.
Yep. I've actually
So
contacted a couple of...
it's always that way, isn't it? Oh, we've got to let these fucking horrible people say what they want to say because of free speech. But the moment that the narrative is something that we don't like, we are going to pepper spray you, we are going to beat you, we are going to shut you down.
Kia ora again, whānau. The clip you've just watched is brought to you today by our patrons. If you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to get behind what we're doing, if you're enjoying our content and wanting to share our content, then maybe you would consider being a patron to Big Hairy News. Head to www.patreon.com/Big Hairy News to sign up to one of our levels and be a patron. At this point, we are only a listener and viewer supported show. It all comes down to you guys. If you feel like jumping on board to help, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Hooroo!